And we're live here. This is Trifecta Sports Talk. I'm your host, Tanner Rebello. I am live here from Wire Studios at Wentworth Institute of Technology. As you can see, we have the campus center in back of me right here. Talk Red Sox baseball, talk about the MLB trade deadline, as well as a bunch of different things related to the Boston Red Sox. Rafael Devers, we talked about that prospect. He was called up to the Pawtucket Red Sox last week. Talk about the third base position, relief pitching, some of the recent games that have been going on, and the lack of offensive consistency out of the offense. Also talk about the Boston Bruins, the lack of signing of David Pastrnak, who is still unsigned by that team. Talk about the Austin Starznick signing and what I think about that and what does that mean for the team and what's going on with Ryan Spooner. Then also be some Celtics talk about the Anthony Davis rumor and how the Celtics could be on the Pelican Star. And then I'm going to finish it up and talk about Paul Pierce, the truth, who came back home to Boston. But we're going to kick it off talking about the Boston Red Sox and how they missed out on Todd Frazier yesterday. So as the Red Sox were playing the Toronto Blue Jays last night, there was a rumor going around that the New York Yankees were in on the Todd Frazier deal with the Chicago White Sox. And there was also rumored the Boston Red Sox were also in on said deal. But ultimately, the Red Sox were never close to a Todd Frazier deal. And David Robertson was a relief pitcher who was also connected to the Red Sox for Chicago. It was rumored that it'd be a two-player deal in the sense that Boston would be going to get their third baseman and their relief pitcher in that trade. But apparently they weren't interested in David Robertson at all. And they weren't even close on Todd Frazier. And if you do look at what the New York Yankees gave up for these two players, if you're the Boston Red Sox, you dodged a bullet here. You know, you've given away too many top prospects. And props to the Chicago White Sox for continuing to build what I think is probably one of the most underrated prospect pools in baseball. And you're starting to see it now. You have Yohan Moncada was called up, who was traded to the Chicago White Sox for Chris Sale from the Boston Red Sox. So you're going to start to see some things with the Chicago White Sox. They're going to be a really good team going in the future. And if you look at what the Houston Astros are now, I could envision the White Sox being that team in about 4 to 5 years, maybe shorter actually. But if you do look at the inactivity by Dave Dombrowski, I think that's props to him. I think he looks at this bullpen, and I know he made some comments the other day after the All-Star break, and I think the bullpen's fine. You know, I missing out on David Robertson's fine. It's not a big deal for your team. Todd Frazier would have added pop to your lineup, and that is something you do need. And I will talk about the offensive inconsistencies a little bit later, but missing out on Todd Frazier isn't that big of a deal. But the fact is now if you look at the third base market in terms of who can they actually go and acquire, it's not exactly full of these power hitters. It's more the Brock Holt type. So they will have some issues in terms of that, and they might have to look at Rafael Devers, who I'll also talk about a little bit later. But missing out the Chicago White Sox, that's fine. That's actually a good move. I saw a lot of Red Sox fans on Twitter actually in favor of it, not going after Todd Frazier, predominantly because he strikes out a ton. Defensively, he's actually a really good third baseman. He's probably, if you did bring him into your organization, it's not going to be as good as a Devin Marrero, but he would probably be your second best defensive third baseman in this organization. Todd Frazier hits home runs, and that's something the Red Sox do desperately need. They rank dead last in the American League in home runs. To 2015, Kansas City Royals was a team that didn't hit a lot of home runs, but they rank 6th in the American League. The Red Sox are 15th, and they're the 4th or 3rd worst home run team in the majors. So that is something that's going to need to change. It's about the pop in the bat. It's about the extra base hits. It's about the runners in scoring position. And the Red Sox haven't been able to do that, and I think that's what Todd Frazier would have been able to do. But ultimately, the Red Sox need an all-star kind of bat. They really want to turn that around, and maybe from within. Maybe you'll see certain players start to turn around their season. Maybe Hanley Ramirez or Mookie Betts will start batting, and maybe Xander Bogaerts will start driving the ball, or consistency from guys like Andrew Benintendi, Chris Young. So there's potential for them to improve with their current roster. And certainly if you look at the Red Sox organization, if you are looking for a power bat, I look at Bryce Benson of the Pawtucket Red Sox. He won the AAA Baseball Home Run Derby last week in the All-Star game. Bryce Brents has, I believe, 18 or 19 home runs or 20 home runs or something like that at this point in Pawtucket. He's been arguably the biggest power hitter in the organization. Brents is a guy who batted around 280 in the majors. Only has about 80 at-bats, though, unfortunately. He didn't really get his real opportunity. And he's a guy who is a trade chip right now. But why would you trade him if you're the Boston Red Sox? This is a guy who's an outfielder, so it doesn't really help you out because Andrew Benintendi, Mookie Betts, Jackie Bradley Jr. are all healthy. And you're not going to start Bryce Brents any of those guys. Maybe he's coming off your bench, but Chris Young hit a home run the other night. So It's not going to start over Chris Young unless bearing an injury. So if you look at Bryce Spence, maybe he's a power bat, maybe he DHs for you. Maybe you throw him at first base, give him an option like that. We'll see what happens. They're trying out Blake Swihart. Blake Swihart's on the DL for the Pawtucket Red Sox right now, but his ankle isn't good enough to actually catch on an everyday basis. So they're going to be having him on the hot corners at third base and first base. He was actually taking ground balls at first yesterday and then today prior to the games for the Pawtucket Red Sox. So Blake Swihart's a guy who is a 270 career hitter in the Major League Baseball. But he doesn't drive the ball particularly well. So if you're looking for a power hitter for the Boston Red Sox, you might not have it from within. I think Bryce Spence is probably your best option in terms of your organization. Probably the best pure power hitter currently right now. Obviously, Hanley Ramirez can turn it on. And if you do look up and down this Red Sox team and compare it to what they were doing last year, it is quite startling. Right now, the projections for Mookie Betts, 29 home runs, 97 RBIs. That's fine, but if you look at last year's projections for Mookie Betts last year had 31 home runs, 113 RBIs. So 2 home runs short, and you're looking about 16 RBIs short. Look at Dustin Pedroia, hit 15 home runs last year, 74 RBIs. This year, Dustin Pedroia is on pace for actually 76 RBIs, but only 7 home runs. And he's actually driving the ball much better in July, and he's batting, I believe, 350-something in the month of July compared to the previous couple months where he started to struggle. Xander Bogaerts is on pace for 10 home runs, 72 RBIs. Batting close to 300. He has that wrist injury now. He had an MRI last night, and it's kind of blown up on him again, and he doesn't look the same. He was batting well north of 300 for much of the year, but really came down after he hurt that hand. So Xander Bogaerts, 10 home runs, 72 RBIs. Last year, 21 home runs, 89 RBIs. Jackie Bradley Jr., who had 26 home runs last year, 87 RBIs, is only on pace for 21 home runs and 65 RBIs. So your DH, Hanley Ramirez, who actually had the walk-off home run last night against the Toronto Blue Jays in another long game. And I'll get to that a little bit later, what's been going on the last couple of weeks. But Hanley hit 30 home runs, 111 RBIs. This is starting first baseman last year for the Boston Red Sox. This year, Hanley Ramirez is on pace for 24 home runs, 62 RBIs. So if you look across the board for this Boston Red Sox team, you're just not seeing the production you had last year. Some of these guys had career years last year, so you can't really expect that. But you're not even seeing your acceptable numbers out of these guys. Andrew Benintendi started to struggle a little bit of late, went 0 for 6 last night. And I've never seen that player lash out in frustration. But last night you saw Andrew Benintendi lash out in frustration. He threw his helmet down after that 0 for 6 night. You look at other players. Mitch Moreland started the year out pretty hot, but his average has come down considerably. And now you're looking at him as, is he a real option for you at first base? And that's part of the reason why Hanley Ramirez started at first base yesterday, with Sam Travis getting sent back down to Pawtucket to add another pitcher to your roster. Sam Travis was batting, I believe, .355 against left-handed pitching. Against right-handed pitching, it's like .75. So not really an option for the Boston Red Sox and Sam Travis. Now with Mitch Moreland has come down considerably, like I just said, and it's to the point where with Moreland, you may be looking at a first base option as well. I think Moreland is the guy going forward. I don't really think they have an option. You're going to have to upgrade third base and first base potentially now, and that's definitely frustrating. But if you can get it from a guy like Blake Swihart, maybe it's a long shot, but he's an option you have. Sam Travis, still, I'm not going to rule him out for this season in terms of being productive against right-handed pitching. And Mitch Moreland can come around. Right now, I believe it's a mechanics issue with Moreland. With him, he had that foot injury. He played through it. He battled through it, hit a couple home runs during it, but his production has come down since then. And if it is mechanics, we should be able to fix it. But, we're hearing the same thing about Xander Bogaerts, that the struggles isn't really to do with the pain in his hand, but it's really the mechanics that it caused. It kind of ruined his mechanics a little bit. So, we'll see what happens with his team. But you're seeing position after position, guys just underproduce, underperform. And if the whole lineup is doing that, which they are, you're going to run into some serious issues. And that's going to be the question. Are they going to trade for a guy like Jed Lowry? Or are they going to go and trade for a guy like Josh Donaldson? Are they going to go for the big bat, a guy who can drive the ball, a guy who a couple years removed from being an MVP kind of player? So that's going to be a question for this Boston Red Sox team, for Dave Nabrowski. How much is he willing to give up? And if you looked at the inactivity with Todd Frazier and David Robertson, he wasn't willing to spend the prospects necessary to get those players. And in my opinion, it's because he didn't believe they were worth that price. If he was going to pay the price that the Yankees gave up, he would have wanted to see a better return for that investment. And there's no point on getting guys on expiring contracts. David Robinson, I believe, has had one more year, but for Todd Frazier, You have him for this year, Rafael Devers next year. So you're looking for an expiring contract, but if you're not willing to deal too many prospects here, it's a tough situation for this Boston Red Sox team. You can bet on guys like Hanley Ramirez, Mookie Betts, Dustin Pedroia having resurgent second halves. But if you look, these are key players on your team: Betts, Pedroia, Bogarts, Bradley, Ramirez, guys who are underproducing from their last year's statistics. It's a troubling time for this team. Their pitching is on point, I believe. Their bullpen's been very good for the Boston Red Sox. Their starting rotations really started to come around. David Price is having a lot of success. Drew Pomeranz, Eduardo Rodriguez has looked pretty good this year coming off the DL. I think he's even going to look better. Rick Porcello is starting to pitch a little bit better as well. Chris Sale has been fantastic for you. You've been able to get good spot starts out of pitchers like a Brian Johnson, who pitched yesterday, 6 innings, 8 hits, 3 earned runs, I believe, for Brian Johnson. To be able to get really good pitching as of late for this Boston Red Sox team, but unfortunately the offensive consistencies have just really plummeted their ability to build up a run here. And I predicted it coming into the All-Star break that they'd have the potential to start a run, especially with the inconsistencies towards the end of the first half there. But ultimately they haven't really shown that. They haven't been able to drive in runners from scoring position. So that's definitely something that they're going to have to change. And who knows what will change it? Is it a hitting coach change? Is that something that needs to be needed or changed on this team? I don't know. Is it a leadership in the clubhouse? So there's a lot of questions with this team. I ultimately think they're a soft team. I don't think they're mentally tough. I think that's part of their issue. They're starting to show some grit as of late in these late inning games, but the fact that they only had 13 hits in 15 innings yesterday is abysmal. So they definitely have some questions here for this Boston Red Sox team. And we're going to go on a quick break, come back and talk more about it, talk about potential trades, what I think should happen, talk about the call-ups that have happened today in the last couple of days, and we'll talk about these long baseball games and what I think Major League Baseball should do to help out these fans. These fans are sitting there for almost 5 hours. Can you believe it, people? Wow. You're back here with Trifecta Sports Talk. Continue to talk Boston Red Sox baseball. Going to go position for position for the Boston Red Sox in terms of what they need. So we'll talk about first base, third base, and the relief pitching in the bullpen. So talking about the first base role, as I said, Blake Swihart is getting some time at first base once he comes off the DL in Pawtucket. And predominantly this is because of his ankle issues. This is what John Farrell said. He said he's been on the DL because of the ankle issue. And as he gets back to active, the stress of catching is not allowing him to catch as a regular everyday catcher. So the reason why the Red Sox are using Blake Swihart at first base or third base down in the minors once he comes back is predominantly because his ankle's not good enough. But I see this as an opportunity for this team. Blake Swihart is an option for them. 271, 350 career at-bats at the major league level, 714 OPS. In theory, is yet to hit his ceiling. I think Blake Swihart is a catcher who can hit 15 to 20 home runs a season, back close about 280 to 290. I think that's what Swihart can do with consistent at-bats. I really do. And the fact is, when he was coming up, it was Christian Vasquez versus Blake Swihart. We had this competition going on. And I always valued Blake Swihart higher than Christian Vasquez simply because I love the idea of having a hitting catcher. Who doesn't? That Carlton Fisk type. And, it hasn't worked out for Blake Swihart in Boston. He had that injury when they moved him out to left field. He had that injury 2 years ago. And then, he's backed out. He was down this year, and he's had a lot of ankle issues in his career. And now he's not able to catch. And he's going to play first base or third base for the Pawtucket Red Sox. And I really hope Blake Swihart hits, and I hope he hits well. Because I think this is a kid who can play first base for the Boston Red Sox. We said it was Sam Travis. People really want Sam Travis to be the everyday first baseman next year for the Boston Red Sox, and I think that's a possibility. But what I see out of Blake Swihart is something more valuable. That switch hitting first baseman who can hit 270 to 280. That is something I value. And if you look at Sam Travis, ultimately he hasn't had enough at-bats to make any kind of judgment call on him. But Sam Travis, he's had 50 plate appearances, 23 years old, 279 batting average. But if you look at the splits, if you go in and look at how he hits against right-handed pitching, it is simply not good enough for this team. And he can change that, of course. But the fact that he bats over 300 against left-handed pitching is phenomenal. But with Sam Travis, when you're facing predominantly right-handed starters, which Boston Red Sox tend to do, Sam Travis is going to have to figure that out. And at this point, I'm not going to say Sam Travis is going to be the starting first baseman next year, because if he can't hit right-handed pitching, what's the point? He's never going to be your starting first baseman if he can't do that. And he has to prove that he can do it. And he hasn't yet. 50 at-bats isn't a lot. But I look at a guy like Blake Swihart, and I like the potential that is there. I like what he can do at the plate, and he's proved it. 350 career at-bats. That's almost one full season. Almost. Not entirely, but you're close enough with that. If you take a look at his splits at the major league level, it'll tell you that this guy can hit on both sides of the plate. This is a player who can play left field fairly well for the Boston Red Sox. In the short time you saw, I believe he played like 30 games out there 2 seasons ago before he got injured. 30 games out in left field, and he looked pretty good towards the end of it. He can play catcher for you too. So, Blake Swihart's an interesting character here. He's an interesting option for the Boston Red Sox. You look at his splits, 225 against left-handed pitching, 293 against right-handed pitching. Obviously, that isn't great in terms of that left-handed pitching matchup. But if you look at a guy like Sam Travis, obviously only 50 at-bats, but he's batting sub-100 against left-handed pitching. And that's not going to be good enough. So if you're looking at a solution for this season for the Boston Red Sox at first base, I want to say it's Mitch Moreland, this veteran Gold Glove winning player. Mitch Moreland started out really good. 273 in April, 279 in May. But then he hurt his ankle, 242 in June. And this month, the month of July, 44 at-bats. Mitch Moreland, 159 batting average. Really poor. Garbage, trash, whatever you want to say it. And obviously his mechanics are messed up. That's what he's saying. The ankle's not an issue anymore. He says it's all mechanics. But your first baseman, the first baseman of the Boston Red Sox, cannot be batting 159 in any month. Collectively, he's batting .249, 309 at-bats this season, 12 home runs, 42 RBIs. He's a grinder. I feel like John Farrell has become a little bit of Claude Julien over there at Fenway Park. He likes his grinders. He likes his glue guys, apparently. Mitch Moreland, he's exceeded my expectations of him. For the amount of money they're paying him, he's been fine. And the fact is, he probably is their best option in terms of the organization. But this is what I'm proposing. I'm proposing Hanley Ramirez be your starting first baseman for the remainder of the season. Hanley might not like it, but guess what? You're the one paying him the money. Hanley Ramirez last year for the Boston Red Sox played first base pretty much every game. He was your starting first baseman. In 2016, he had 549 plate appearances, played in 147 games. And he batted .286, hit 30 home runs, and 111 RBIs as the starting first baseman for the Boston Red Sox. DH, you can figure out the DH role if you move Hanley over to first base full time. You can figure that out later. You can click and plug. You can call up Bryce Brents. You can put in Chris Young. You can put them in as your DHs. You can figure that out. You can tell me Mitch Moreland's a Gold Glove first baseman, and I can tell you it doesn't matter. Because first base, you can stick anybody over there, any stick over there. You stuck Hanley Ramirez over there. You were a pennant-winning team. You can deal with it. It's not a big deal. You need a first baseman who can hit. And guess what? If you plug Bryce Brenson as your everyday DH, or if you use him every couple days, or use Chris Young in that position, you're better off for it. You cannot have a player batting .249 at first base. He only has 12 home runs. Look, I get he was injured. I get he grinded through it. But give me a break. He's a professional athlete, Mitch Moreland is. I would move Hanley Ramirez over to first base. Now, I would say, Hanley, this is your position. You did it so well last year. Good job. Go back out. Do it again. Because Hanley at DH is fine. But it's not great. It's below what you'd expected out of him. All he has to do is hit. And Hanley Ramirez is batting .257, 15 home runs, 37 RBIs for the Boston Red Sox. Look at his projected numbers for Hanley Ramirez. 26 home runs, .266 average is what he's on pace for right now, 74 RBIs, so well below what he did last year. Hanley couldn't play first base because of the shoulder issue. But at the moment, I think your best bet with Mitch Moreland is to sit him. Fix out the mechanic issue, put Hanley Ramirez at first base. You can figure out the DH spot later. If you want to DH Moreland to get his mechanics right, fine, do it. But I'm sick and tired of people defending Mitch Moreland because he won a Gold Glove last year at first base. Who cares? Who really cares? No one. Because guess what? He wasn't on the Boston Red Sox when he won the Gold Glove last year. No, he's on the Texas Rangers. That's just my thought on first base. Talk about third base now. Your third base options within the organization right now: Devin Marrero, Brock Holt, Josh Rutledge. You have Lynn down in Pawtucket. You have Devers in Pawtucket as well. You have Michael Chavis down in Portland. Chavis isn't ready. He's probably 2 years away. Devers has shown some pop down in Pawtucket. Already has 2 home runs down there. 20-plus home runs. 21 home runs, I think, for Devers on the season. Let me just double-check that number. 20 home runs for Devers down in Pawtucket. He's batting .308 right now for the Pawtucket Red Sox between them and Portland. Devers offensively looks ready, but defensively, this is a player who you don't want on your hot corner. If he's playing third base for you, you're going to see some errors from Rafael Devers, and that's fine. He's a 20-year-old. He shouldn't be up here. You should not have to call up Rafael Devers this fall. Devers should stay in Pawtucket. Figure out the defensive issues. And I'm not really sold that Devers is going to be a long-time third base player because I don't think he can do it. And neither can scouts. Scouts look at him, and they don't think he can be a third baseman. They don't think he's defensively capable of being an everyday third baseman. And I've seen him play, and I concur with that thought. I'm not sold on Devers being a third baseman. It'll be interesting to see. I think he has the arm strength to play third base with Devers, but ultimately it's going to be down to timing, reaction, and I just don't see him being a long-time third baseman. But I think Devers should get the opportunity to play in Pawtucket for an extended period of time And I don't want to see him up here. Do not want to see him up here this year. I want to see Rafael Devers in spring training. I want to see what he does then, and maybe, just maybe, he's competing for that starting job next year to start. But at that point, he'll be 21 years old. What's the point of rushing? What's the point of increasing his MLB experience? Because if you bring him up, you're going to lose a year. So it's your third base spot for this year. I don't think it's Devers. I don't think it's Chavis. I think if you look within the organization, right now you have Devin Marrero, Brock Holt, but Devin Marrero is a player batting like $180, and he couldn't even lay down a bunt yesterday. Yeah, I get his defense is great, the best in the organization, but if you can't lay down a bunt, I'm sorry. You don't belong there. You don't belong in the majors if you can't do that. That's what your job was. You could have ended the game potentially. But Marrero failed to get that bunt down yesterday. Devin Marrero had a little bit of hot streak. Started to turn it up a little bit, but you ultimately know with Devin Marrero, the offense isn't there. It's not a major league capable offensive player. In my opinion, I don't think he is. And I don't think the coaching staff thinks he is either. With Brock Holt, you got to take it slow with him. He's back from having that vertigo symptoms that silenced him for months. But with Brock Holt, I'm not putting him as my everyday starting third baseman just because you know what you get with Brock Holt. Eventually Brock Holt's going to, start to slow down a little bit. With Brock Holt, he's not an everyday player. He's a utility player. Josh Rutledge is supposed to be starting rehab with the Pawtucket Red Sox soon and could potentially be up with the Boston Red Sox as well. So you could have a Rutledge-Holt third base platoon, move on from Marrero. Maybe it's Lynn. Maybe you're going to call Lynn back up from Pawtucket, but ultimately you're not really sure what you have there. He was very hot for the Boston Red Sox, but that's certainly not the player he is or the player he's going to be. I'm not going to shit on him, but I don't think he's a great player, and I don't think he will be. So what's really your option here within your organization? There's really no great options for the Boston Red Sox at third base. You have Devers and Chavis on the horizon, down the road potentially, but you don't want to rush that. What's the point in rushing it? If you look at this team, are they a World Series contending team? Potentially. They had the third best odds after the All-Star break to win the World Series this year. But I don't see it. I really don't. I watch this team day in and day out, and I don't think this Boston Red Sox team right now is a World Series contending team. I think they have some issues to work out with that. Offense has to be consistent. And at third base, maybe the options in your organization aren't going to be good enough. And maybe you do have to trade. You missed out on Todd Frazier. I'm going to read some more names. Does Jed Lowry get you excited? Potentially. He's probably better than anything you have right now. Does Josh Harrison of the Pittsburgh Pirates get you excited? He's Brock Holt, essentially. That's what he plays for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He's a utility player for Pittsburgh. So Eduardo Nunez, San Francisco Giants, batting .298, 63 games, I believe, 17 stolen bases. So he provides more of that athletic option, speedy option for you that you don't really have. A base stealer, potentially Nunez, maybe. But it's not exactly get you excited here. You're not going to you're not going to trade for a pop in your bat. You're going to trade for Josh Donaldson. Do you want to trade one of your prospects for that kind of player? I don't know. I don't think so. I think with Dave Dombrowski, he's already taken so much heat for trading away prospects that I don't think he can. But if you look back at it now, Drew Pomeranz, that trade's a win. I was sitting here, a couple months ago, and that wasn't a win. But Anderson Espinoza for Drew Pomeranz looks like a steal now. It's insane. But it's perspective. It's all perspective. You look at that trade he did with the Chicago White Sox, trading Michael Kopech and Yohan Moncada for Chris Sale. Eventually I think it's going to be break even because I think Moncada is going to be a star. And given your third base issues right now, doesn't look great. But you have Chris Sale, who's looked fantastic and will probably win the Cy Young or be one of the Cy Young candidates at the end of the year. Look at other trades for Dombrowski. Trading Travis Shaw doesn't look that great because right now you might have to trade a prospect for a third baseman, and you had Travis Shaw in your organization. Tyler Thornburg got injured. Okay, you can't really blame Dombrowski for that. If Tyler Thornburg was healthy, if he was healthy for his team and he pitched the way he did last year for the Milwaukee Brewers, I still think you look at that Travis Shaw trade as a loss, given what Shaw's been able to do for the Milwaukee Brewers. I talked about it last week. The third base position for the Boston Red Sox has been a black hole ever since Wade Boggs. You can say Mike Lowell. Mike Lowell, I'll give you Mike Lowell if you say he stabilized your position, which he did. He helped you win a World Series. But the longest tenured Boston Red Sox third baseman that's more than 5 years was Wade Boggs, 1982 to 1992. 10 years for Wade Boggs. You've not been able to solidify that position. It's not just Dombrowski's issue. It's been an issue for Theo, too. He wasn't able to do it for a long time. And even with Mike Lowell, that was Jeremy Capstein. You remember that. Theo walked out prior to that trade. Theo did not do that trade. That was Jeremy Capstein who did that trade for Mike Lowell and Josh Beckett. So, thank you, Jeremy Capstein, not Theo Epstein. But honestly, third base has been a hole for you. And if you're going to go trade for a player and you're willing to give up prospects, give me Josh Donaldson. Give me a player who can hit the ball far. Give me an exciting player because you need pop. Your offense doesn't have any pop. Hanley Ramirez is the only player I envision really having pop on his bat. Mookie Betts, more base hits from Mookie. I don't need to see the home runs from Mookie Betts. I need to see more base hits because I know Mookie Betts is on when he's batting over 300. When he's batting close to 300, that's when you know Mookie Betts is on. In fact, he's batting around 270 this season. Sure, he might hit 26 home runs. He hit 31 last year. Mookie Betts has not hit well this year. He has not done it. And when he hasn't done it for a consistent period of time. Mookie Betts has been a disappointment to me. Last year, runner-up for the MVP. Did not expect him to follow up that season with another season like that. But I expected Mookie Betts to at least be consistent. But his lows this year have been low. Now, it's unfortunate for this team because they need him to be on. And if you look at Xander Bogaerts, I'm done waiting around to see power out of this kid. At this point, I'm done with Xander Bogaerts. It's weird to say. Defensively, I still think he's subpar shortstop. I still think he makes a lot of mistakes. For some reason, I still don't feel comfortable with him at shortstop. I think he's fine. I think he's a really good player. He gets a ton of hits for you. A lot of singles, though. Not a lot of extra base hits out of Xander Bogaerts, and I've been waiting for that pop, and he just hasn't come. Has not tried to hit the ball for power. That's fine. That's the player he is. But there's a reason why he didn't make the All-Star team, because he doesn't hold up against other competition. Other elite shortstops surpass Xander Bogaerts. He's a great player, but not elite. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Andrew Benintendi, out in left field. This is a guy that, he's a rookie as well. He's young, 23 years old. He's had some really low lows this season, including last night when he went 0 for 6. But if you look at this team, you look at the third base position, look at the first base position, you can't be entirely happy with the production you've gotten. Mitch Moreland, like I said, he's exceeded my expectations, but right now, he's just not serviceable at first base. Look at the bullpen. Talking about the bullpen, this is a position or, a role that they've actually had a lot of success in. The fact is, Boston Red Sox have had one of the better bullpens in baseball. I think they're top 3 in the American League for bullpen ERA. And recently, they've had a lot of innings put on this team. They've only played 2 9-inning games since Friday, and they've played every day. They played every day since Friday, and they've only had 2 days where they actually only played 9 innings of baseball. They had 15 innings last night. Saturday night, they had 16 innings. Sunday, they played 18 innings. Friday and Monday were the only days they just played 9 innings of baseball. And even if you get your starter to give you 6, 7, 8 innings of work, your bullpen's overworked, and you're seeing that. This morning, I reported that the Boston Red Sox had called up Ben Taylor and Kyle Martin from the Pawtucket Red Sox. And in turn, they sent down Hector Velasquez and Brian Johnson. Velasquez pitched 4 innings of relief and got the win last night for the Boston Red Sox. Brian Johnson started that game and pitched 6 innings. So incredible, the amount of innings you put on your bullpen. Guys like Brandon Workman have pitched very effectively for the Boston Red Sox. Matt Barnes pitched well. Joe Kelly, before getting injured, was pitching at an elite level. Craig Kimbrell pitched fantastic. You have Heath Hembree's had a ton of innings on him. Robbie Scott, who was sent down, had a ton of innings on him as well. Blaine Boyer, ton of innings on him. 55, I think, innings was what John Farrell said. Let me look up the quote from John Farrell, but it's just incredible, the amount of innings. 55 innings since Saturday they put on their bullpen. It's incredible. And the fact is, they've held up incredibly well. Every day after one of these long games, and you're like, well, the bullpen's going to get hit tonight. They're going to give up a big one. And the fact is, they hold it together for the most part. The bullpen as a whole is not an issue. In fact, it's been great. And if you're talking about a late inning reliever, you need one of those guys. I'm fine with, Craig Kimball's your closer. That's fantastic. Matt Barnes, 7th inning, I'm comfortable with that. On the road, maybe not so much. Joe Kelly as an 8th, I feel good about that. Under pressure, I'm not really sure what you have with Joe Kelly. But I like Joe Kelly. I like what he's been able to do, and I think he deserves the opportunity to show he is an 8th inning guy because he has the stuff. He can pitch. He can throw. He can hurl. Whatever you want to say, he can do it. Question is, what can he do under pressure? And that's where my questions rise with Joe Kelly. Brandon Workman, this is a guy that I talked about last week, and I really was pushing for Brandon Workman to get called up. And the fact is, he didn't. Brandon Workman did not get called up, and then he did. I think I just contradicted myself. He got called up Saturday. But I was talking about him for a long time. Brandon Workman pitched earlier this year for the Boston Red Sox, pitched a couple of appearances, went back down, spent a ton of time with the Pawtucket Red Sox, 1.55 innings, 28 innings pitched for the Pawtucket for Brandon Workman. Workman was a success story in 2013 when he broke in with the team. Didn't have a great regular season for the Boston Red Sox, but Brandon Workman's postseason, he didn't give a run in 9 appearances in the World Series run. Pitched Game 6 of the World Series. This guy has balls. He has the stones. Brandon Workman does. And I think Brandon Workman should get the opportunity to be a 7th inning guy as well for this Boston Red Sox team. He came back up Saturday after I pushed for it. Maybe Dave Nabrowski reads Trifecta Network, or maybe he heard me in the podcast, but I pushed for Brandon Workman. This is a guy who deserved another opportunity at the major league level. He dealt with Tommy John. If you look at his 2015 statistics, they were ballooned up because he had that elbow injury. He was pitching through it for about a month, I believe. And then, he came back in 2016, I think June or July 2016, he came back, and he's finally back in 2017 full. His stuff looks good. Last night he pitched 2 innings of work, gave up a run in the 2nd inning of relief because he's predominant. He can work extended innings of relief, but the previous inning he was throwing about 95, 96. He was throwing pretty hard just to, pitch. He wanted to show his stuff, and then he sent him out for his 2nd inning, and he lost a little bit on the fastball, 92, 93, I believe, with the 2nd inning for Brandon Workman. He gave up a sacrifice fly that drove in a run. So, not incredibly bad for him. And he's shown a lot of stuff, and he's pitched a lot since being called up on Saturday, and the whole bullpen as a whole has. And I think this bullpen deserves a shot. I know the trade deadline's coming up, but I think you have it within your organization to not trade for a reliever. I don't need a reliever. I certainly don't. I don't think they do. And I don't think Dave Dombrowski truly believes he needs a reliever. Even with Joe Kelly going down, Joe Kelly will come back. Carson Smith could come back. Brandon Workman's an option. Matt Barnes can pitch at home. Don't pitch him on the road, though, John Farrell. Do not do it. Heath Hembry, use him situationally. That's it. Do not make him pitch multiple innings of relief. Heath Hembry is a situational pitcher. Learn, John. Learn. That's what he is. But the fact is, he had to pitch a lot of innings, so you can't even really blame John Farrell when it comes down to it because you don't have a lot of options in that bullpen. I think they have it. Austin Maddox is a guy I like from Pawtucket. I think Austin Maddox is a player that should continue to get looks from the Boston Red Sox. He was sent back down predominantly because they needed more fresh arms. They called up Brian Johnson, I think, for Maddox's roster spot. Hector Velasquez has pitched a couple times out of the bullpen. I do like him as a long inning reliever for the Boston Red Sox. Maybe you'll see Hector Velasquez coming out of the pen in the postseason for you. Potentially that could be an option here. You don't really know, but he's had a couple opportunities to come out, and he's thrown multiple innings of relief, and he's done a really good job of doing it. We'll see what we got out of Kyle Martin. This is Kyle Martin's first opportunity at the major league level. You'll see Ben Taylor, who was called up today by Boston. Ben Taylor had a pretty decent success in terms of starting his major league opportunity this year. This is his 4th call-up of the year. His last couple ones have been really bad to the point where you probably didn't expect to see him back up, but the fact is the bullpen is overworked, and they're in need of some help. They really are. We're going to go in a quick break here, come back, and finish up with some Red Sox thoughts going to the 3 o'clock hour. And then in the 4 o'clock hour, we'll talk Boston Bruins hockey, and we'll talk how the truth has come back to Boston and is here to stay. You're back here with Trifecta Sports Talk. I'm your host, Tanner Rapello. You're probably watching, listening on Facebook Live, or maybe listening on Wire Radio. Tour group in back of me, it looks like. So I'm going to finish up the Red Sox hour here from 2 to 3 before heading into the 3 to 4 hour with Major League Baseball pace of play talk. Yep, pace of play. We're going to be talking about the length of a baseball game. It's got a weird look. I don't think you knew what pace of play means. Did you?
No, but it sounds like there's an echo.
There's an echo. Oh, probably is an echo. There is definitely an echo in here because I had the speakers turned up still, the one that's behind me. That's my bad.
Sounds better.
Sounds better? You shouldn't be able to hear me. Well, you can because you have ears. But so pace of play. Saturday, I was at the baseball game. Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees. You get that 4:10 first pitch. You have to feel pretty confident. 4:10 first pitch, you can get out, 3-hour baseball game, 7:30 dinner reservations, 8 o'clock dinner reservations. Makes for a nice night, right? No, it doesn't. 5 hours and 50 minutes later, after first pitch, that's when the game ended. 16 innings of baseball on Saturday from the Boston Red Sox. 16 innings, and I can tell you, that's not fun. I watch every baseball game. I'm down to Pawtucket, covering the Pawtucket Red Sox, sitting there at 5 hours and 50 minutes. Fans wanted to jump. It was awful. It's not fun. It hurts the product of the game. If you're a casual fan, if you're going for your first game at Fenway Park, 5 hours and 50 minutes, are you going back? No. No, you don't. You don't go back. Hell, I don't want to go back. I had free ticket offer on Monday. I turned them down because I'm not going back. I'm not going to go back to a 5 hour and 50-minute baseball game. And this needs to change. It needs to change now. In AAA and in the minors, they have this pitch clock, 20-second pitch clock. You have 20 seconds to pitch the ball, get off the mound, go. And the issue is it doesn't even work there. You want to know why? You want to know why it doesn't work there? It's because the umpires are waving off the guy in the pitch clock saying, nope. Shut it off. Why? For no reason. Because they don't want to commit. They don't care. The baseball players don't certainly care. The pitchers don't care. There's a study that came out last year, this offseason, and it said that the longer the pitcher holds on to the baseball, the more time in between each pitches, the more they can put on the baseball, the more velocity they can throw. The more velocity you can throw over a year equates to about 1.3 wins per year if you move it just a little bit faster. If your fastball is a little bit faster, you have a better chance of winning the game over the course of the season. On average, pitchers this year are taking longer than ever. And the fact is, a 5 hour and 50-minute baseball game, 16 innings of play, really has nothing to do with the pitches. Has nothing to do with that. And the extra innings and that garbage, I'll discuss a little bit later. But the pitch clock, give me a pitch clock at the major league level, enforce it with the umpires. The fact is, the players have all the power right now with the CBA. And the fact is, it's not working. It's not helping the game. You're killing the game of baseball right now. You're killing it. You're just slicing it. You got the knife out and you're just all stabbing it. It's like Jon Snow at Game of Thrones when everybody stabbed him. Baseball's getting stabbed by every player, every umpire, every coach. You think the fans like it? You think fans like sitting there? If your games are going over 3 hours on average, give me a break. No one cares. 162 games over 3 hours a game? No. That doesn't work. I'm sorry. Look at basketball, the NBA. The NBA eliminated timeouts. That's a product that doesn't have a time issue. And they are cutting time. But what are you doing in Major League Baseball? What are you doing for baseball? No, you're adding time to your game. Your games are getting longer. The sport that everyone thought was too long is getting longer on average. Yeah, that doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. And trust me, when these TV contracts are up, this next run, woof, watch out. ESPN, I think they're pretty much done with baseball. They have sliced up their baseball coverage like you'd slice up sushi rolls. They sliced that shit up and they fired people because they understand Baseball is no longer in demand. It is no longer a must-watch sport. The fact is, players like Aaron Judge are keeping it around. They add excitement. But if your average game length is over 3 hours every night, and then you get a 5-hour and 50-minute game, you got to be kidding me. No one wants to watch it. Give me a pitch clock. Sure, do it. It's not going to make a difference, though. It ultimately will not make a difference. You have to make radical changes to your game. The fact that a 16-hour affair can happen, then a couple days later, a 15-inning game? Who in the hell wants to watch that? Not me. Yuck. As that Dennis Ecto says, yuck. It's disgusting. They need to change. You should not have your fans sitting there in misery. Sitting there, 16 innings. Want to know when they stop serving beer at Fenway? When they start serving food? The 7th inning. You're sitting there for another whole game. You're getting hungry. You're sitting there getting hungry in Fenway Park. 5 hours and 50 minutes on Saturday. And then you had a game last night, 4 hours and 59 minutes after a 1 o'clock delay. That game ended after 1 o'clock in the morning. 1 o'clock in the morning. 4 hours and 59 minutes. 15-inning baseball game on a Monday. The day after you had an 18-inning game. Oh, sorry, it was Tuesday. I was going on a little rant. Monday was a 9-inning game. You had an 18-inning game on Sunday with the doubleheader, and then you had a 16-inning game on Saturday. They have played so much baseball, it makes people want to puke. I want to see the TV numbers. I really do. I want to see the inning-by-inning TV numbers as these games get longer and longer, and people just shut the tube off. Last night, as Hanley Ramirez belted a home run over the Green Monster, Dave O'Brien of Nesson said, "We get to go home." And you want to know why? That's what everyone else was thinking. We get to go to sleep. We get to shut this TV off. Or they shut it off a long time ago. The fact is, you saw the pure joy on the players after Hanley hit the home run. They were more excited that they get to go home than that they won the baseball game. Can you imagine sitting there in the dugout for 15 innings? Can you imagine just sucking at the plate? It's such a frustrating sport, really. You know, it used to be my favorite sport, and it just drains you. Just drains you emotionally. 162 games, and games are getting longer. What the hell? You know, they need to change. Extra innings need to change. You should not having a 16-inning affair, and then a couple days later, a 15-inning game. No! Stop! Just stop it. I know we don't like ties. I don't like ties either. So why don't we do what the World Baseball Classic does? Why don't we do what they do? In extra innings, the 10th inning, that can be a normal inning. You can have that, fine, normal. There you go. Win it in the 10th. But if you losers can't win it in 10 innings, if you can't decide the goddamn game in 10 innings, 11th inning, we're going to kick it up a notch. We're going to do what hockey did. Hockey got a brain. They give you 3-on-3 overtime. Because they thought about it. They used their brain. And guess what? Major League Baseball came up with these rules for the WBC, and this is what should happen. Starting with the 11th inning, you should start with runners at first and second base. That's right. You start with 2 runners on. See what happens. 2 runners on, no outs. You don't score there, in my mind, 12th inning, you're starting bases loaded. 0 outs. Get these games done. Get it done. Get it over with. It's disgusting. No one wants to watch it. Get the games done. You have 162 of them. Just finish it. When you get to October, fine. 25-inning affairs. I don't care. But if you're talking to me from April to September, who cares? No one does. Get the games done. First and second after the 11th inning. Go with the WBC extra innings rules. Do that. Maybe your games won't be running 5 hours and fans won't be jumping off the Green Monster. Because that's what they wanted to do. Don't think they were happy to be there. I was there Saturday. There was no fan who was jubilant about sitting there for 5 hours and 50 minutes. There was no one. I heard fans cheer. Fans were cheering when the Yankees won that game. They were more happy that the game was over. They didn't want to be there. Free baseball. Free baseball from Fenway. No one wants to be there at that point. Give me what I paid for. I don't need free baseball. I need the game to be over with. I'm saying as a member of the media. So, obviously. But fans feel the same way. And I'm telling you, if you're a casual fan of baseball, you're not going to watch if you know the game's going to go over 4 hours. You don't want to commit that too much time of your life to it. People don't want to watch. And your ratings are down this year. In fact, they've been down every year except the year David Ortiz retired. Every single season for the last 10 years, you've seen a decline in your ratings, and it will not stop. It will get worse. And it's not just NESN. It is the reason why ESPN cut baseball tonight is because it doesn't do anything for them. It doesn't move the needle. And the fact is, I don't think they're going to bid again. And if they bid, it's going to be way low. If you're Major League Baseball, you should be shaking in your boots, but you're not doing anything. And if you're worried about the players' union, tell the players' union there might not be a league. Maybe not 10 years, maybe not 20 years, but 30 years from now, you might have just killed the sport. You have to make a change. If the NBA is taking a sport that has no issues with time and cutting time, and you're adding time to the sport that everyone agrees needs to be cut, you're screwed. You're done. You're out of luck. And I've seen this year after year. I called it a couple years ago. This sport is going downhill. And I don't see it going back up unless radical changes are made. Going to go on a quick break. Come back, talk about the Boston Bruins, talk about the Boston Celtics, and now the truth has come back to Boston. No more baseball talk. I promise. You're back with Trifecta Sports Talk. My voice might sound a little bit shittier here. It's because I brought Justin. Justin is the NHL editor for Trifecta Network, and we're going to talk the Boston Bruins. Talk about the signing of Austin Sciarzik. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that, Justin?
It's not a stupid signing. It's not a great signing. It's kind of another depth player signing. Because as you saw last playoffs, I mean, it was more on the defensive side, but they ran into a lot of injury problems, and they're at the point where they're saying, "Who do we play? We got no one left." And also, I mean, clearly he's a good player. He proves that he can play. He's got potential to maybe be a third line center at best. Maybe he takes over Brian Spooner if Brian Spooner doesn't work out. Or maybe he takes over for fourth line and he's a solid energy line kind of guy. I'm not upset with the signing, but if that makes him not be able to sign David Pastrnak, then that's when I start having a problem.
It actually has no impact whatsoever on Pastrnak or any signing they're going to do at the NHL level because, in fact, Austin Sciarzik was signed to a one-year, two-way deal worth $675,000. And that two-way contract, he's currently on the AHL Providence contract. So his contract actually doesn't sit on the Boston Bruins cap space right now. So the Bruins cap space, as it sits right now, is $12.976 million and change. About $3 of that will be to Ryan Spooner, who is going through arbitration. I believe on the 26th is the date of that arbitration meeting. Right now it's July 19th. So Spooner will be handled shortly. And with Austin Sciarzik, I don't envision him being an actual NHL player other than probably a bottom six forward kind of guy. He's 24 years old. 2 years he was captain of the Miami, Ohio University team. So that's a pretty big deal as a leadership kind of guy. He played 49 games for the Boston Bruins last season. He had 5 goals, 8 assists, was his rookie year, was signed as a free agent. And you kind of have to give it some credit to the Boston Bruins front office, the way they've been able to sign these unsigned guys, like these undrafted players like Torrey Krug and Austin Sciarzik and Noel Acciari. These are guys who just weren't drafted. And, you know, they've actually hit pretty well on these guys. Down in Providence, he had a lot of success in 2015-16, which was his rookie year in the AHL. He had 61 points. So this is a guy who has the capability to find the back of the net. I just don't envision him being a really good player on even this Boston Bruins team. You know, he is a fourth-line guy on this team. That is what he is. You know, that is what Tim Schaller is, right? That's what these guys are. They're nothing more than that. You know, maybe they played third line, but in reality, probably not. You know, if you're a team that is going to be contending for a Stanley Cup or a deep playoff run, a guy like Sciarzik is not going to be on that third line for you. Not in my opinion. Your third line center should be David Backes or David Krejci. You should run 3 centers. You should run Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, and David Backes. Those should be your top 3 centers on this Boston Bruins team. But the fact is, they signed a veteran player in David Backes to a ton of money with the idea of him playing a wing, a position he was not comfortable with, a position that he didn't think he was playing when he signed. Because I remember this guy coming on the radio the day he was signed, saying that if you have David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron, and David Backes as your top 3 centers, you should be good. So this guy had the impression of being a center on your team. The fact is he played wing, and he had little success at doing so. He had no chemistry with David Krejci. David Backes should be your third-line center. Ryan Spooner, I don't know what to do with him. Ultimately, he's a better fit at center. I don't think he can play wing. And I think they've tried that before. It just hasn't really worked. But ultimately, you know, Sciarzik signing is fine. He provides depth in your organization. But if you're relying on him, watch out. That's not good. This is a Noel Acciari signing. That's essentially what this is, a Tim Schaller signing. Every deal they've done this offseason has been these little re-signings to these players are fine. They're good players. They're role players on your team. They're going to be fourth-line guys. In my opinion, that's all they've done. All they've done is re-sign guys who can play the fourth line and maybe a third line here or there. You know, you sit there and you're sitting there right now and David Pastrnak isn't signed. You're still waiting on David Pastrnak. You know, this is a guy who scored 34 goals last year for you. and he's still unsigned. David Pastrnak is going to cost anywhere from $5 to $7 million per year, and I think that's kind of put Don Sweeney into a holding pattern where he's afraid to really go make a move, and I think that's a smart thing to do because they don't need to make a move. They have enough bad contracts on this team. But ultimately, that must be holding him up a little bit because you still have a lot of money outstanding that you need to spend. You have to re-sign David Pastrnak. You have to. But he still doesn't seem he can skate. If you watch David Pastrnak try to skate, it's something weird. It really is. There's no fluidity to the way this guy skates. He's fast. Don't get me wrong. He's very fast. But he seems to be falling down. He's not a very fluid skater with David Pastrnak. It is odd to watch. It really is. It blows my mind that he's still having issues with it. But when I watch this kid skate, it just doesn't look smooth. But the fact is you have to pay him. You have to sign him to a long-term deal. He's either 30-plus goal scorer, he's very young for you, and he should be a big part of your offense going forward. Do I like spending that much money on a player like him? Not really, because I do have a lot of questions with the Pastrnak. He doesn't have to play in his own end. That's not a big deal to me. But, ultimately, that's what they have to do. A guy like David Krejci's contract, that's going to weigh them down. It certainly is. Brad Marchand's contract's fine for now, but in a couple of years it'll weigh them down. Their best move is what they're doing. I really like what Don Sweeney's doing with this team. I like the idea of non-action because I think non-action is the best course of action for this team. I think guys like Charlie McAvoy, Prospector Carlson, Jeremy Lawson, guys like that are your future. I think it's smart. But if a guy like Noah Chari, a guy like Austin Zarnik, a guy like Tim Scheller, guys who I know what their ceiling are, guys who what they're capable of, if they're taking time away from a player like Charlie McAvoy, he's a defenseman, but you don't get what I mean. They're taking away time for these young players. That's when I get frustrated. That's what irks me, is when you take away time from players like that. Because if you honestly think that you're going to get that production from these guys, if these guys are your future, you're kind of in some dark waters there. Justin, David Pastrnak, do you think he can skate fluid? Is he a smooth skater?
Absolutely.
Is he?
Yeah.
I think so.
I do.
I don't.
I think he's one of the better skaters in the league.
I don't think so. I think he looks like he's always falling on his ass, David Pastrnak.
I've never seen that in his play.
Yeah.
He's one of Brad Marchand is not the most fluid skater, but he makes, I guess I see what you mean by fluid, but I mean, skating ability, it's hard to judge.
Yeah.
Pastrnak is the kind of guy that just kind of makes open ice moves. I mean, he's made those crazy spin moves, crazy between the leg deeks. He's a crazy player. Or not crazy, but he tries to go for the one-on-one plays, which is nice about Sweeney because he actually allows him. He says if it's there, take it. Unlike Claude, who would be like, oh no, he has to play defense. This kid can't play defense.
I think he's a fine player. I do. I think offensively he's talented. I do question the skating ability. I don't think it's elite by any means. I think it's serviceable. I truly do think it is, but he's worth $5 to $7 million a year. But he's not a difference maker. He's not going to be your MVP on your team. I don't think he is. I don't think he's capable of being that. Not yet. He can develop it for sure.
And he's only 20. He's not even legally allowed to drink in the United States.
Yeah. He's 21 years old, but with Pastrnak, he's an interesting player for sure. With Pastrnak, 17 minutes of ice time last year, he had 70 points. He's a great player for you. He really is. But ultimately with Pastrnak, I just don't see him being an MVP kind of player on your team.
I think he's the kind of player that needs to play with a guy like Bergeron or somebody that can give him the puck. As much as he can make his own opportunities from his play style, it doesn't always end well.
Right.
He is a very smart hockey player. He's very, very talented on the power play. That's where he's most dangerous. I think last season he scored most of his he had 14 power play points last season, so that's not the greatest, but just about half of his goals, a little less than half, came on the power play. So he can skate fairly well. He's got a great shot. as we can see, he scores a lot. But, I mean, he is playing with one of the greatest passers in the world, Patrice Bergeron, and David Krejci, who's probably a top 10 passer in the world, or was. I don't know who is anymore.
With David Krejci,
they kind of got that Czech connection thing. They had it in Pasternak's early years, I think, because the team was kind of like, hey, Krejci, you speak the same language as this kid. Help him out. And people realized that Pasternak needs to play with Bergeron because Bergeron's talents is a little bit more than Krejci. And Krejci's kind of deteriorating with two bad hips.
I think with Pasternak, to say he doesn't have a great skating ability might not be correct, but whenever I watch him skate, I'm not really comfortable with the way he skates. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just the awkwardness I think he has. But I think the reason why Krejci and Pasternak were kind of broken up there was predominantly because David Krejci, he's not a slow player by any means, but his game is slower. Yes. David Krejci is more effective when he's playing a slower game of hockey. And David Pasternak, he's an elusive player. He skates fast for sure. He's just not a good fit with David Krejci. And I think that's why they were thinking with David Backes is maybe Backes could play more of that power forward kind of role.
Kind of like Lucic.
But he's not because David Backes is a playmaker. That's what he is. And that's, David Krejci's a playmaker. So you have two guys who predominantly throughout their entire career thought pass first. Mm-hmm. You don't have a score on that line. And Frank Vetrano was another guy who was playing there too a little bit. And he ultimately, I think he's too fast too for Krejci. Krejci's not slow, but it's that slow pace of play.
Fast as these kids.
Like when he was at his best, he had Milan Lucic, who was a power forward. And that's what they need. They need a power forward. You are never going to see David Krejci have success with this team again unless you give him someone who can play his speed, his tempo.
You're going to need a Nathan Horton or a Milan Lucic.
Or a Thomas Vanek.
Possibly.
Thomas Vanek is a power forward. He can play second line minutes. And if a guy like Frank Vetrano impresses you, if he seems he can fit and play his way into the role, Vanek can go down to that third line. But I think Vanek is in your price point. I really do. I think you can afford to sign Thomas Vanek. He's a power forward by nature, and I think he can play the speed that Krejci plays. And if you give Krejci a veteran winger who is similar to Milan Lucic's play style, I think you can have success. Obviously, he has the bad hips. The injuries have hurted Krejci, but he's still a playmaker. He can still make all the passes you need him to. That's not going to affect him. Maybe not as fast as he used to be, but he still has that brain. He still knows what to make to do. He might not score as much, but you need to give David Krejci the best position he can be in. And if he's going to have a Pasternak or a Vetrano at his wing, he's not going to have any success for you. You have to put him in the right position. And it's unfortunate because you're paying him a lot of money, but it's time you actually helped him out because you have not done him any favors since trading away Milan Lucic. No favors whatsoever. Do you have any final Bruins thoughts, Justin?
Other than I can't wait for hockey season. Not really. And the other thing is I have no idea what their lineup's going to look like going into the season. There's a lot of question marks. And is it going to be let the kids play? Or is it going to be have this kid play this game and, I don't like him, send him back down, bring this kid up, just kind of hodgepodge of kids going up and down all season. I don't really want that. I want to see that maybe, first back at Carlson come in, get some games if he fits in, keep him. Don't send him back down and up. That ruins their games because the Bruins are confidence too.
I agree. I think we saw the Red Sox do that too with some of their young players. Sam Travis had 25 at-bats in 28 games for the Boston Red Sox before getting sent down. That is atrocious. You want to mess up a young kid? That's how you do it. And with the Boston Bruins, you don't want to bury a kid in the bottom six because I've seen that happen before. You don't want to. Frank Vetrano is one of those guys who just gets buried. You need time. When you're young, you need time on ice. And I am worried that I think Cassidy knows what he's doing. He's smart managing young players. He did it in Providence. So I have all the faith in the world in Bruce Cassidy. If this is Claude Julien, I'm very worried. It's interesting that you brought up the idea of you don't know what the lineups are going to be. And I think that's true with the Boston Celtics as well. What are the Celtics going to do? I don't think Brad Stevens know what they're going to do, and I think it's the same thing with the Boston Bruins. I think Bruce Cassidy has no idea what he's going to do. For that first line, okay, you're penciling in Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand. You're going to have probably David Pastrnak at that right wing. That's probably what you're going to have for your first line. That's fine. That second line, is it going to be David Krejci center? Yeah, probably David Krejci is center, but who's going to play the wing? Are you going to go with David Backes again? I don't think you should, but you might because they were sold on it apparently. I don't think Backes wants to play that second line wing.
I want to see him play.
No one wants to see him play.
He's on the team.
You did, yeah. Great player. Fits the Bruins mentality for sure. But he's just not going to be that. He should just not be your second line wing. Is it going to be Matt Bolesky? I don't think so. Is Frank Vichar going to play out of his mind for Rebecca Karlsson? What are you going to get from this Boston Bruins team? And as I transition the Celtics talk here, it's really the same thing in the NBA. But this Boston Celtics team, they only have a couple guards in this team. You don't have a true shooting guard. And, we're hearing these rumors now that Gordon Hayward might play the 2 to start, which would be insane. You would have your point guard in Isaiah Thomas. Your 2 guard would be Gordon Hayward. Your small forward would be Jay Crowder. Your power forward would be Al Horford. And Aaron Baines would be your center. But I honestly don't think Brad Stevens knows what he wants to do. And I think it's perfectly smart because you need to see. You're going to click and plug. And I think the lineup you see with the Boston Celtics game 1 is going to be different from game 20 or game 30 or game 50. I think it's going to change throughout the entire season, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think they're going to have to be versatile with this team. But the Bruins and Celtics are very similar. They both have a lot of young players. Bruins have more, in my opinion. But both are very similar in that mindset. And I actually said this last week. I don't know if Justin heard it. But I think this Boston Bruins team could sneakily be a very good team. In fact, I think they could actually make a playoff run. And that, of course, is going to rely on young players like Brandon Carlo, Charlie McAvoy, for Rebecca Karlsson, maybe a guy like for Toronto to step up. And maybe you see guys like David Krejci have a rebound year. But I think that this Boston Bruins team, just like the Celtics, can make a run in their respective leagues. I really do. But the Boston Celtics, predominantly what I want to talk about is the Anthony Davis rumor that's been circling around, and as well as talk about Paul Pierce and his return to Boston and how he's retiring as a member of the Boston Celtics, which was announced this week. But with Anthony Davis, we'll talk about that. Chris Mannix of The Vertical put out a report that said the NBA league executives believe if the New Orleans Pelicans fail this season to open up, that you could see the Boston Celtics offer something to this New Orleans Pelicans teams for Anthony Davis. It is being reported, though, that this Pelicans front office wants to see what a front court of Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins would look like. They saw it a little bit last year, but not to the extent. So they want to see. They also have Drew Holiday on that team. Rajon Rondo is on that team. So you have some young talent down in New Orleans, and this team could come out either way. Ultimately, I don't see it working. I do not see the New Orleans Pelicans having a front court that works with Cousins and Davis. I don't see it. And I also don't see the Boston Celtics trading for Anthony Davis. I think they can put together a package. And if there's any team, if Anthony Davis is truly on the market and the New Orleans Pelicans are willing to trade a player like that, if the Boston Celtics are interested, they can get it. They could have traded for Paul George. They could have offered more for Jimmy Butler. They could have offered more for DeMarcus Cousins last year. We all know it. We've heard it. If they wanted to, they could put together a package that works. But I'm not sure what Danny Ainge is thinking. I'm not sure what he wants. The fact is they were a better team last year when you had Al Horford at the 5. But Al Horford doesn't want to play the 5. He wants to play the 4. And he's a stretch 4. That's going to be interesting to see how that works this year. Gordon Hayward, when he was playing with the Utah Jazz, he had Rudy Gobert clogging up the paint. And now the fact that the bigs are going to be drawn out of the paint by Al Horford, you might see some really interesting things out of Gordon Hayward this year. He scored 21 points last year per game. I think you could see Gordon Hayward go anywhere from 25 to 30 points per game. I really think he can be an impact player for this Boston Celtics team. But Anthony Davis, that seems a little bit out of the realm right now. But if you could land in Anthony Davis, you're going to probably catapult into being the best team in the East. Probably the best team in the East by far. I really don't know what you have in Jason Tatum. I liked what I saw in Summer League, but you don't know. I like to see the drive out of Jaylen Brown, but ultimately, for a 3 pick from last year, I was a little underwhelmed with Jaylen Brown. I really was. I expected a little bit more out of Jaylen. I didn't love the pick when they made it, but I think Jalen has a lot of upside still, but will he ever live up to that number 3 pick? I'm not sure. I think you can expect more out of Jaylen Brown. And I'm also worried about the playing time for a player like Brown or Tatum. I think the fact that you have all these players at one position, Marcus Morris, Gordon Hayward, you have Jay Crowder, you have Jaylen Brown, you have Jason Tatum, all players who traditionally play the 3. These are all considered small forward, and obviously the NBA and Brad Stevens especially play positionless basketball. We hear this term all the time, positionless basketball. But eventually playing time might not be as much as you'd like. I think they'll bring Jason Tatum around slowly like they did with Jaylen Brown. I think they'll do that. And ultimately, I don't love it. You have the number 3 pick. Potentially, basically the number 1 pick, if you really want to think about it, was Jason Tatum. If you really want to break it down, he was the number 1 pick for you because you had the number 1 pick. You had the opportunity to draft that 1. You traded it away, but Jason Tatum will continue to be evaluated as a number 1 pick, as he should be. But you're not going to get the playing time. I don't envision him being it. And I thought Jaylen Brown didn't get enough playing time last year. And that's Brad Stevens. He's trying to bring these players on slowly, but ultimately, the way you get better, as in any sport, is playing time. You're not going to get better by sitting on the bench. Sure, practice can help, but if you're not facing tough competition, you won't get any better. So I do hope that Brad Stevens gives Jason Tatum plenty of playing time from the get-go. I hope he gets that opportunity, but he is not that high up on the depth chart. Obviously, positionless basketball, so he can't get too bogged down in that mindset, but ultimately, he is not your starting small forward. He's not your backup small forward. And in theory, Jaylen Brown's your 3rd small forward. And then is Marcus Morris your 4th? Is Jason Tatum your 5th? You have 5 real starting small forwards on your team. Positionless basketball. But is Gordon Hayward really going to be an effective shooting guard? Is he going to be an effective player playing out of the 2? I'm not sure. It's going to be an interesting look. Whatever Brad Stevens put together is going to be very interesting because he has a lot of options here, but a lot of players with similar play sets in terms of the position they play. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a different look for the Boston Celtics. It's going to be a different team. It could go any way. I think ultimately they'll be a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. Should they be the number 2 team? Probably. I don't think any other team really got that much better. Or maybe they got worse. But are they better than the Cleveland Cavaliers? That is a question that's always going to come back to. Can they beat the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals? Because that's what it ultimately comes back to if you're Danny Ainge. Can you beat the Cleveland Cavaliers and LeBron James? And I look at that. And I look at this Boston Celtics team, and I'm not sure. Jaylen Brown takes a step forward. If Gordon Hayward fits perfectly. If Isaiah Thomas continues to be an MVP kind of player. If Jason Tatum plays better than Jaylen Brown did last year, or at least at the level of Jaylen Brown in that second half of the year, then maybe, maybe you're better than that Cleveland team, because I really think Cleveland is going to fall apart. What happens with Carmelo Anthony? Does Carmelo stay with the New York Knicks? The Knicks aren't your competition, but if Carmelo ends up going to the Cleveland Cavaliers, you're not going to even compete. If they move out Kevin Love, maybe you do, because I really do think if the Cleveland Cavaliers are fine with moving out Kevin Love for Carmelo Anthony, that is a mistake. Because I respect Kevin Love's game. I don't think a lot of people do nowadays. We'll see what happens. Really will be interesting. But the biggest Boston Celtics news by far in the last week was the return of number 34. Not David Ortiz. Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce retired as a member of the Boston Celtics. Paul Pierce, when I think the definition of a Boston Celtic, I think of Paul Pierce. Obviously, I'm only 22 years old. My entire life, predominantly, 1998 to 2012, you had Paul Pierce. I was born in 95. But, Paul Pierce is my definition of a Celtic. My dad's generation is going to be, Larry Bird. But to me, it's Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce defines what is the Boston Celtics. And I envision Paul being better than Larry Bird, and for one reason. Larry Bird had a supporting cast for the predominant of his career. Where if you look at Paul Pierce, he was the guy. He was the guy year in and year out. He turned a losing franchise at the time into a competitor, something to watch. This is a clutch player. Go look at the highlight reel of Paul Pierce's clutch moments in his career, and it's a 14-minute video. 14 minutes of highlights of him winning ball games for the Celtics, teams like the Wizards, where in the 2014-15 season, Paul Pierce, I believe he won 2 or 3 playoff games at 37 years old for the Washington Wizards. This is a guy who is the definition of clutch. The definition of the truth. That is who this guy is. Paul Pierce retires as a member of the Boston Celtics. Averaged 21.8 points per game for the Boston Celtics. Played over 1,100 games. Legendary performer. Helped bring banner 17 to the Boston Celtics. And in theory, it's a shame he couldn't have won more. This is a guy you would have envisioned, having the heart to win multiple. But the fact is, it took too long for the Boston Celtics to build up around him. When they built up around him, it's almost like it was already too late. 30 years old. He played 9 years for the team before they were able to really build a NBA final competing team. He had 5 years of that year. 5 years of annually contending for a title, and that last year when Ray Allen decided to take his talents to South Beach without telling anybody. It was a disappointing end here to the Big Three in Boston, or the new Big Three. The real Big Three was not that, unfortunately. They still don't hold a candle to the real Big Three. But in the modern era, winning one championship is fine. You're not going to win 10 in a row. That's not how modern sports work. Although a team like the New England Patriots could tell you otherwise, that they potentially could win 10 in a row or something like that. But it doesn't happen often. Dynasties are tough to come by. And the fact is, Paul Pierce was part of that Celtic-Laker rivalry. He reignited that rivalry. Paul Pierce versus Kobe. We saw that. Paul Pierce was the only guy in my mind that could go toe-to-toe with LeBron James. A guy who could just suffocate and be on him the entire game. A guy who could shoot a ball right in LeBron's face and bury it. I've seen Paul Pierce at more clutch moments than any other player in Boston history. You want to say it's Tom Brady or David Ortiz. I look at Paul Pierce because that guy is the definition of clutch. You have Boston, in this generation. We've had Tom Brady, Paul Pierce, and David Ortiz, 3 really clutch players. 2 of them happen to be the number 34. And obviously, Paul Pierce has the least amount of championships out of those 3 players, but I'm going to tell you, Paul Pierce is at their level, if not better. Because the fact is, he was the Boston Celtics for several years. For all those other guys, Ortiz, Brady, had a surrounding party. And obviously, Paul Pierce won a championship with guys like Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, but it is impressive. And he came home. I would have loved to see him come back and play 1 year at the age of 40 years old. I would have loved to see him do it, lace up the shoes one last time for the Boston Celtics. That's one of the few teams I'm still generally a really big fan of, the Boston Celtics. Other teams I've written about and covered for over a year now, and I've kind of lost some of that fan perspective of it. But I don't know. There's something special about Paul Pierce and the Boston Celtics. I would have loved to see him play one more year. Actually, in NBA 2K17, I actually told Paul Pierce not to retire and ended up signing him. So that's been fun. I've gotten Paul Pierce in a Celtics uniform in a video game. But it was special to see. It was a no-doubter in my mind that he was end up going to re-sign a one-day contract and ultimately retire with the Boston Celtics. But I'd have loved to see somehow he would have been in a uniform this year. That'd have been something special. That's it for Trifecta Sports Talk here. Kind of thirsty, losing my voice a little bit here. So we're going to not be back Friday here, but we'll be back live from McCoy Stadium. Evan Cook and I will talk Pawtucket Red Sox baseball, Boston Red Sox baseball, live from the ballpark. Potentially have some player interviews as well, so it should be a fun time. And should be a good view as well. Hopefully it doesn't rain. But hopefully the baseball games are also shorter. That'd be kind of nice, wouldn't it? Have a great day. Check us out on trifectanetwork.com. Thank you for listening.